We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 47b. The Mishnah continues: if a person brings his shore into the chutz of the balabayis shelo b'reshus without permission, v'nagcho shoro shel balabayis, and then the shore of the balabayis gores the animal, o shenashcho kalbo shel balabayis, or if the dog of the balabayis bites the shore that's there again without permission, so pater, so the balabayis is pater because again the person brought the shore into the chutz of the balabayis without any permission. Nagach hu shoro shel balabayis. Let's say the other way around. Let's say the shore that's there without permission gores the axe of the balabayis. So chayiv. So then the owner of the shore is going to be chayiv. Nafa leboro v'hivish meimov. Let's say the shore that's there without permission falls into the pit of the balabayis and ruins the water, and that's in the pit. So chayiv. So he's chayiv again. He's there without permission. Haya avivo beno l'socho. Let's say his father or his son is in the pit, and then by falling into the pit, this shore ends up killing the father or the son. Mishalim es hakofer. So then he does need to pay kofer. Again, all because the shore is there with no permission. Now, if the animal enters with permission of the balabayis or the balachotzer, so then the balachotzer is chayiv for anything that happens. Rebbe says, "Bekulon eino chayiv." In all of these cases, the balabayis is not chayiv at sheyakabel olav lishmor, unless he accepts upon himself to be a shomer, to watch over the ox and make sure it doesn't do any damage. Otherwise, the balabayis is not chayiv. And the Gemara will explain the machlokas between Rebbe and the Rabbanon momentarily. The Gemara says, "Taima de shelo b'reshus." The reason why the person, let's say, who brings the kederos in, the reason why he's responsible for any damage that those pots, that those kederos do, is because he brought them in without permission. Ha b'reshus, but let's say he brought it in with permission. Lo mechaye bal kederos benizke behemto de bal chotzer. Then the owner of the kederos, the owner of the pot, is not responsible for damage that happens to the animal of the bal chotzer, of the owner of the chotzer. V'lo amrinon kibule kavel bal kederos netirusa de behemto de bal chotzer. And we don't say that automatically the person who owns the kederos accepted upon himself a shmira and is saying that he's going to be responsible for any damage that happens to the animal that belongs to the balachotzer. Money. So who seems to be the author of this first line of the Mishnah? Rebbe, it seems to be Rebbe. Diamar kol bistama lo kabel tirusa. Because Rebbe is essentially saying at the end of the Mishnah that we don't assume automatically that a person is makabel shmira, that a person is makabel, that he's watching over and takes responsibility for any damage that happens. The Gemara is getting this from the last line of Rebbe, last line of the Mishnah, because again it said bekulon eino chayiv at sheyakabel olav lishmor. A person is not chayiv until he actively says that he's taking responsibility, and that seems to be the case in the first part of the Mishnah as well. He's not taking responsibility. Just because he enters Bereshus does not necessarily mean that he's taking responsibility. And so the Gemara says, Amos Eifa, so let's look at the end. In the next line of the Mishnah it says, Im hichnes Bereshus, if he enters Bereshus, Bal Chotzer Chayiv. So then it says that the owner of the Chotzer is Chayiv for any damage that his animal does. Asan l'Rabbanan, that seems to follow the Rabbanan. The Amri B'stoma Nami Kibule Kavel Olenetirusa, because the Rabbanan are saying that automatically once you get permission, you're also taking responsibility for any damages that happen. And Rashi explains, Taima de shelo b'reshus, the reason why the person who brings the pot in is responsible for the damages that his pot does is because he's entering without permission. Mishum hachim huzka behem bal kederos chayiv. Therefore, that's the reason why if the animal is damaged by the pots, the owner of the pots is chayiv. Moni Rebbe, and so the Gemara assumed that that's Rebbe, again, that would say that b'reshus, the person would not be responsible. The Amr b'seifa b'kulan eino chayiv v'chulu, because again, Rebbe says at the end of the Mishnah, you're not chayiv until you actively take responsibility. And Rashi now explains what the Gemara is assuming is the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rebbe. The Kasalka Daitach, because right now the Gemara thinks the Rabbanan, that according to the Rabbanan, just like the owner of the Chotzer, if he lets the person with the Kederos in Bereshus, he is now chayiv in any damage that happens to those Kederos. Because we assume, even though he just gave permission, he didn't say he was taking responsibility, but we assume automatically he is taking responsibility. So the Gemara is assuming that the Rabbanan would say the same in the opposite direction. The owner of the Kederos would then be chayiv in any damage that happens to the balabayis. Because since the balabayis is giving him permission to enter, so we assume if he's giving him reshusa l'meil, if he's giving him reshusa to enter, so at that point already automatically the person who owns the pots is accepting upon himself to watch over his pots, to lo lizku kederosav l'bal hachotzer, that his pots should not do damage to the owner of the chotzer. In other words, what the Gemara is assuming here and asking the question is that it's a two-way street. Anytime we're saying birishus, therefore let's say the owner of the chutzner is chayiv, then the same would be true of the owner of the person bringing in the items. He's also chayiv. That's the sheet of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan are saying automatically when there's permission given, there's also responsibility taken. But Rebbe is saying no, the person's not taking responsibility unless he actively takes responsibility. But the problem is it's a contradiction within the Mishnah, because if you look in the between the Reish and the Seifa, it sounds like in the very first line of the Mishnah we're following Rebbe that you don't automatically take responsibility. But again, Ema Seifa, if you look at the next line, the end of the Mishnah, where it says Hichnas Bereshus Baal Chotzer Chayev, where it says that if he enters Bereshus, apparently the Baal Chotzer is taking responsibility, and the other way around also, the person entering is also taking the responsibility. That sounds like the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say that, again, the Amri Bistamanami Kibule Kabel Alem Nitirusa, that automatically you're accepting to watch over it, you're accepting responsibility, and therefore it's a contradiction within the beginning of the Mishnah. Is it following Rebbe, or is it following the Rabbanan? Vesu, and then the Gemara now asks further, Rebbe Omer Bekulan Eno Chayiv Ad Sheikabel Ola Balabayis Lishmor. It says at the end of the Mishnah that Rebbe says you're not chayiv until you actively take responsibility. The Balabayis has to take responsibility. So now Reisha V'Sefer Rebbe, you're now saying that the very beginning of the Mishnah and the very end of the Mishnah is Rebbe U'Mitziyas Rabbanan, and the middle case of the Mishnah is the Rabbanan. That's problematic. And so the Gemara now says, Rabbi Zeira says, Tavra, it has to be broken. Misha Shana Zu, Lo Shana Zu. In other words, it's correct. The person who learned one line of the Mishnah is not the same as the person who learned the next line of the Mishnah. The very first line of the Mishnah follows Rebbe, the middle of the Mishnah follows Rabban, and then it goes back to Rebbe. And the Gemara continues with a second approach. Rava Amar, Rava says, Kula Rabbanan. The entire beginning of the Mishnah is the Rabbanan. Rebbe only appears at the very end of the Mishnah. And how do we resolve the contradiction? The answer is, Uvreshus Shmiras Kederos Kibel Ola Balachotzer Ve'afilu Nishbru Baruach. It's actually the other way around. When we're saying that the Balachotzer, if he gives permission, he accepts and he takes responsibility, he's actually the one taking responsibility for everything. The person entering is not taking responsibility according to the Rabbanan. It is only the Balach Chotzer who is taking responsibility. He's saying that he's watching over the other person's kederos, even if they just break in the wind, he's taking that responsibility, and therefore there really is no contradiction over here, because the Rabbanan are saying that anytime a person enters with permission, so automatically the owner of the property, the owner of the Chotzer, is taking full responsibility for any damage that occurs, and Rebbe is saying that's not the case. It's not an automatic assumption of responsibility, but it's not a two-way street according to the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan are not arguing that the person entering is also taking responsibility for any damage that his items do. That is not the case according to the Rabbanan. And Rashi explains, Tavra, again, the Mishnah is disjointed, meaning to say, Kasha Hadadi, Reisha V'Seifa. According to the first approach of Rabbi Zeira, it actually is a contradiction, the beginning and the end of the Mishnah. The Tanakamo, Misha Shanazu, Lo Shanazu, and therefore there are different lines according to different Tanoim. V'Tanohi Aliba de Rabbanan, it's Machlokas Tanoim, within the Rabbanan. Mar Savar Pligi Rabbanan led the Rebbe, Mar Savar Lo Pligi, one holds the Rabbanan do argue with Rebbe, the other one says the Rabbanan do not argue with Rebbe, and then we have the answer of Rava, Afilu Nishborin Baruach, that really what the Rabbanan just mean to say is the owner of the Chotzer is taking full responsibility for everything, even if it breaks in the wind. The ol va'antre loch ka'amar le, because what the owner of the Chotzer is really saying is, you bring in your stuff, I'm giving you permission, and I'm going to be the one that's taking responsibility, that's doing the shmir, that's watching over. Aval ba'al kederos lo kavel ola midi, but the person who owns the kederos, who owns the pot, is actually not is actually not taking responsibility for anything in that situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hichnes peiros of l'chotzer balabayis v'chulu. If a person brings his fruits into the courtyard of the balabayis without permission, and then the animal of the balabayis is damaged by those fruits, so then the owner of the fruits is responsible. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, Lo shanu ela shahuchleka behen. When we say that the owner of the fruits is responsible, that's only if what happened was that the animal slipped on the fruits, and that's how he became damaged. Avol achla potter, but let's say the animal ate the fruits, and then because of overeating, that's what caused the damage to the animal. So in that situation, the owner of the fruits is not responsible. My time, and what's the reason? We apply the rule that the animal should not have eaten. If the animal is eating, that's something it's doing, so to speak, on its own, and the owner of the fruits is not responsible for that kind of damage. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Amina kinayim v'shachiv Rav, Amar l'hashemaita. I say that it was when Rav was dozing off, when he was falling asleep, that he said this halacha, because it's not true. It's contradicted by a brisa. The Tanyas, we learned in a brisa, Hanosen Sam Hamoves Lifnei Behemas Chavero. If a person puts poison in front of the animal of his friend, and the animal eats the poison, becomes damaged, Pater mi Dinei Adam, the person is Pater in terms of any payment, in terms of Dinei Adam, in terms of the court system. V'chaya b'Dinei shamayim, but the person is chayiv by the laws of heaven. He's chayiv in dinei shamayim. And so we make an inference from the Brisa as follows. When we're talking about poison, that's something that it's not normal for the animal to eat. That's why the person is pater in that case. But let's say he puts fruits in front of the animal, and the animal eats the fruits and is damaged. The avida da'achla, that's something to expect. It's normal for the animal to eat the peiros. B'dinei adam nami mechayiv. The implication of the Brisa is that even b'dinei adam, even in the regular court system, the person is chayiv. And the Gemara therefore asks, V'amai, why should that be the case according to Rav? We should apply the rule that the animal should not have eaten. It's the animal that's eating it on its own, and therefore, again, the person should not be chayiv in such a situation. And the Gemara says, Amri, the answer as follows. Hu adin afilu peiros nami pater midinei adam. Really, the way to understand this Brisa is it's not only by poison. The same would be true by peiros as well. The person would be pater in the regular court system. Bava Kamma Daf, and the Brisa is teaching us by talking specifically about a poison. Why is it talking about poison when it's true by all fruits? The chiddush is that afilu sam hamavis nami, that even when it comes to poison, the lo avida da'achla, which is something that the animal is not expected to eat, still chayiv b'dinei shamayim, still the person is chayiv in terms of the laws of heaven. V'bay semen, if you want, I could say another answer to this Brisa, how we can understand that the Brisa would refer to fruit as well. Sam hamavis nami, even when we're talking about poison, be'afrazta, we're actually talking about afrazta, the hainu piri, that's actually a kind of fruit that is also a poison, so the Brisa itself is referring to fruit. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Meseches, we have a question from the following Brisa. If a woman is entering to grind wheat by the balabayis, shelo b'reshus, and she doesn't have permission, and then the animal of the balabayis eats the wheat, so pater, so in that situation, the owner of the animal is going to be pater. But if, let's say, the animal eats the wheat and the animal is damaged from the wheat, chayev, so then she is chayev. In that situation, again, she entered shelo b'reshus, and apparently she's chayev, and this is talking about a situation where the animal ate it. And so the Gemara asks, V'amai, so why should she be chayev? Neima havala shelo tochal. We should say again, and the animal should just not have eaten, the animal should have stayed away, and therefore the woman should not be responsible. Why is she chayev in this case, according to Rav? Amri, and so the Gemara says the answer as follows: Umi adifa mimas nisan. Is this question any stronger than the Mishnah itself? The Mishnah itself has the exact same case. And what did we say? We said that the Mishnah is not talking about where the animal ate it and was damaged. It's just talking about where it slipped on the fruits and it was damaged. And that can be the same situation over here. It doesn't actually say in this brisa that the animal was damaged by eating. It just says imhuzka, if it was damaged. So maybe it was not damaged through eating, and maybe that's why the brisa says that she is chayiv. And the Gemara says, but what were you asking the question in the first place for? It is exactly the same as the Mishnah. Why are we asking the question from this brisa in the first place? And the Gemara says, Amar loch, so he'll say to you, Bishlama mas nisin. I understand the Mishnah, Katani imhuzka bahen, because the language of the Mishnah it says is imhuzka bahen, if it became damaged by them. So that word bahen, shehuchlaka bahenhu, that sounds like it's saying that it slipped on them. So we can interpret it not as talking about eating, but talking about slipping. Avalacha, but over here when we're talking about the wheat, katani imhuzka, it just says the words imhuzka if it was damaged. Velo katani, but it doesn't have the word bahen. So achilahu de katani, that sounds like we're talking about eating. That's why we asked the question initially from the brisa. V'idach, but the other one will respond to you. V'idach amarlach, the other will respond to you. Lo shna, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter if you have the word bahen or you don't have the word bahen. The brisa means exactly the same as the Mishnah. It's talking not about where the animal is eating, but where the animal is slipping on the wheat. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following brisa. Hichnis shoro lechatzer balabayis shelo b'reshus. If a person brings his ox into the courtyard of the balabayis without permission, v'yachal chitin v'hitriz v'meis, and the animal, the shore, eats the wheat of the balabayis and it gets diarrhea and it dies, pater. So in that case, the balabayis is going to be pater because the animal is there with no permission. V'im hichnis b'reshus, but if the animal enters with the permission of the balachotzer, so then balachotzer chayiv, then the owner of the chotzer is chayiv, and this is a situation where the shore is eating, and we're saying apparently that the balachotzer is chayiv, and so the Gemara says, V'yamai, why should the balachotzer be chayiv? Havalo shalo yocha, like we said before, the animal should not have eaten. It should be the responsibility of the owner of the animal. If the animal eats, that's what Rav said earlier. And the Gemara answers to this question. Amar Rava says, Birishus ashalo birishus karamis. You're asking a question on a situation of permission to an initial case of without permission, meaning to say, in the initial case where Rav said is halacha, that was talking about where the fruits are brought in without permission. And Rav said that in that situation, if the animal eats from the fruits, so then the owner of the fruits is going to be pater. Havla shelo tochal, it shouldn't have eaten those fruits. But over here you have the opposite situation. Here the animal is being brought in with the permission of the balachotzer, and we're saying the balachotzer Chotzer is chayiv if the animal eats and the animal dies, and that's what the Gemara says. That's a completely different case. Bereshus, if the animal is brought in with the permission of the Baal HaChotzer, Shmiras Shoro Kibel Olav, so he's accepted to watch over his ox. He's essentially saying, come in with permission, and I am going to watch over your ox. I'll take responsibility. That's what the Baal HaChotzer is saying. V'afilu chinek es atzmo, even if it strangles itself, meaning even if the animal strangles itself, meaning to say the Baal HaChotzer is taking upon himself all kinds of responsibility in this case, and you can't ask from this case on the halacha of Rav. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. They had the following question: let's say you have a Baal HaChotzer who accepts upon himself the responsibility. The other person is bringing his animal or his items into the Chotzer, and the Baal HaChotzer is taking responsibility to protect those items. So what is the extent of the Baal HaChotzer's responsibility? Is he only accepting responsibility that he won't damage those items, meaning his property will not damage this particular property? Maybe he's even accepting upon himself that other things from the outside are not going to come in and damage this property. He's even accepting responsibility for that kind of damage. And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Tani Rav Yehuda Bar Simon ben Izakin de Beikarna, because Rav Yehuda Bar Simon taught in the Meseches Nezikin of Beikarna, he taught as follows: Hichnes peiros of l'chatzer balabayas shelo b'rishus. Let's say a person brings his fruits into the courtyard of the balabayas without permission in this case, uba shor mimakom acher, and then an ox comes from a different place. It's an ox that's owned not by the person who owns, not by the balabayas. It's coming from the outside, va'acholan, and it comes in and it eats these fruits. So potter, then he is potter. We'll address who is potter in a moment, but it says over here in this brisa that he is potter. V'im hechnes b'rishus, but if he brings in the fruits with permission, so chayiv. So then he is chayiv. And so the Gemara says, what exactly does this brisa mean? Man potter uman chayiv. Who is the person that's potter in the beginning of the brisa? Who's the person that's chayiv in the end of the brisa? Lav potter Baal Chotzer. V'chayiv Baal Chotzer doesn't mean to say that the Baal Chotzer is potter when it's without permission, then the Baal Chotzer is not taking responsibility. But when the Baal Chotzer gives permission, so then he's taking responsibility, and apparently it's even from a damage that comes from the outside, because it says that if it's hichnes b'rishus he's chayiv, even when the shore comes mimakom acher. And the Gemara continues, Amri, they answer as follows: Lo, no, that is not the explanation of the Brisa. The Brisa is not talking about the Baal Chotzer at all. What the Brisa means to say is Potter Baal Hashor, V'chaya Baal Hashor. It means in the beginning case, when he comes in without permission, the owner of the shore is Potter, but when he comes in with permission, then the owner of the shore is Chayiv. Now that doesn't make so much sense, because what is the owner of the shore? The owner of the shore is coming from the outside, has nothing to do with his property, and that's why the Gemara now asks, what difference does it make Bereshus or Shelo Bereshus in terms of the Baal Hashor? The Baal Hashor, but if the Bryce is talking about the Baal Hashor, again, the Gemara will go on to ask what difference does it make if it was Bereshus or not, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memches Amud Aleph.